You want to take a low-key image, but you're not really sure what it is or how to do it. Well, in this video, I'm going to give you my view of what a low-key photography is and how you might take a low-key image. Low-key is all about conveying that dark and moody story and giving your image some emotion. By using the darks and the shadows and the contrasts, you can then focus on the highlights in your image and try to bring out the subject of your image with this dark and moody and deep background. It's not about creating a black and white image and that's it, because you could probably get as good, if not better, images in colour that are low key, but it's more about focusing on the subject, focusing on the highlights and the subject. Low key is most often used in portraiture photography, where you have a model, a subject, and you dim the lights, just have a light focusing on the subject themselves, maybe just from one side with the background dark, and it really highlights the subject image. But you don't have to have a person, you don't have to have a model to create that sort of photography, and you can do it in your house, as I am today in my little office, and you could set up your own little studio and create your own nice, dark, moody, low light photos. And that's exactly what I'm going to do in this video. I'm going to set up my little table, my little studio, and show you how I would take a couple of low-key photos, and hopefully you can see how I'm doing it and you can do a similar thing for your photos. If you've got this far in the video, why don't you subscribe to the channel? Because I'm trying really hard to create these photography and Instagram videos, and it'll give me huge inspiration if you subscribe to the channel. That would be fantastic. If you already have, thank you very much. Your low-key image isn't about underexposing the shot, because it needs to be reasonably well exposed. But if you look at the histogram, most of the histogram would be on the left, indicating darker, blacker tones. But that doesn't mean to say it's not going to be exposed correctly, because you can expose the image correctly. As long as you don't blow out the darks or blow out the lights, then you're still well exposed. And that's important for low-key photography. What low-key photography also is night photography, where you go outside and take pictures of people or buildings or lights at night. That's night photography. That's not low-key photography, although it is similar. It uses dark shadows and contrasts to emphasize the light in your image. That's very much more like night photography rather than low-key. So it's worth bearing that in mind. Of course, when it comes to photography, when it comes to low-key, high-key, any type of photography, there's no strict rules, because whatever you decide is low-key photography is going to be right, because it could be right for you. But there are some general principles when it comes to photography styles, themes and genres. And this is my view on what low-key is. So what I'll do now is I'll set up my little home studio and I'll take a couple of shots and run through my process of taking those shots, and you can see exactly what I'm doing. And if you want to, you can emulate what I'm doing, or you can see what I'm doing and do something completely different. But at least it gives you an idea of what low-key photography is. For these low-key images, I've got the Canon 400D all set up and ready. I've got a wooden table here, small wooden table that I've got. This cloth bag, it's just a cloth bag, it's black. And I'm using this black cloth bag to provide those darks, the darkness in my image. And in this first image, I'm going to take a picture of this old Canon camera. And the reason I'm doing this, because I like the fact it's got this reflected silvery light on it that will hopefully bring out those highlights in the image. I've got my lights on in the room, so I'm not going to, I could just take the lights out of the room and then shoot, that'd be easy. But I've got my lights on in the room and I'm going to shoot it exactly as it is now. Lights on, light in the room and everything fine. So let's have a look, let's take this shot. Then I've got my Canon, I've just got one stop underexposed. I don't want to be spot on exposed, I want to be underexposed, otherwise it'll be too bright. I've got 1/5 of a second, ISO 100, and in this instance I've got f5 and I've got the 10-second timer on this. So I'm just going to take this shot now. 10 seconds later we'll see what this comes out like. And there we have it. and there's the first shot on the back of camera, and you can see the histogram is all the way to the left, although there is some information on the right. It's not all left. And there's my camera in the picture. Obviously I will cut out the tops and the bottoms of this, crop this in a little bit, but that's, so you can see on the histogram there is some light on the right hand side. It's not all to the left, and that's important to get some highlights in your image. That's the first image. We'll have a look at that in a minute, and then I'll find something else to take a shot of. In this image, I'm trying to get a picture of the candle. Once again, I've got the Canon 400D. I'm one stop underexposed, f4.5, ISO 100, and this is giving me half a second. So I'm going to take that image. It's on a 10-second timer, and there's my shot. Instagram's very much to the left, and the candle looks very faint in the picture. But we'll have a look at that on the computer, and we'll see what that looks like, and hopefully that comes out quite nice. Now that I've taken these pictures, what I'll do, I'll jump on my computer and I'll edit these pictures with you, and you can see the final result. It's not something I normally do. I haven't done this for a while, but I think it could be helpful to edit these pictures together, and you can have a look, see how they come out directly. So this first picture I've just opened is of the camera. Sadly, if I zoom into 100%, you can see that the word Canon is soft. It's out of focus, but that bit's in focus. I went for F5 because I thought it would sort of help to make sure everything's in focus, but it isn't. So that's life. That's how it goes. So what I'll do, I'll edit this with you. So firstly, I could possibly bring down the exposure. If I did that, then it brings the whole thing down, and it just gets too dark. So I might just drop the exposure a tiny little bit. I drop the highlights a little bit. If I drop the highlights too much, then once again it darkens the subject and it loses all the interest. So I'll just drop those a little bit. The shadows, I want to drop the shadows down, almost take them out fully. I'm going to leave the whites. It dulls the picture off if you take the whites down, and I'll bring the blacks down as well. So now I'm starting to get a nice low-key shot. So what I tend to do is I'll add a bit of texture, and if you notice, if I add texture, this part of the image now starts to show, whereas before without texture it's a bit dull. So I quite like that. I quite like. It's not just about the camera in this image, it's about things around it as well. These lines, the lines on this piece of cloth as well. And I'll just add a little bit of dehaze. But you see, if you take D8 up, it really brightens the image up. It brightens all that cloth and it's grey and grim. So if I drop the dehaze a little bit, it sort of helps to bring out the focus on this camera. That's cool. Vibrance, I could add vibrance, but it doesn't really do much because it doesn't really make a difference. And very rarely do I touch saturation, and I very rarely touch the saturation slider because all of the other things that you use on Lightroom, it adds saturation. It just naturally adds it. So if you add extra saturation, before you know it, your photo's very, very colourful and it just looks unnatural. So if I do anything, I sort of reduce saturation. I'll just leave it like that for now. So when it comes to the lights, I want to bring out the lights in this camera. That's where the lights are. So I'll just open up the lights. And of course, because I want a low-key shot, I'm going to try to bring down the darks a bit. So that's darkened it up a bit as well. And also bring down the shadows a bit more. No, they don't need to be moved, so they're fine. I'll leave them back at 0. So what I can do is, obviously, this saturation, most of this saturation doesn't really do a lot, but I'll leave those. What I can do is obviously darken these, the luminance of the colours. I could just do them all because there's not much colour in this particular image. It's black and white, so I could just take them all out. It doesn't make any difference, really. That's fine. So it's looking good. What I always do is sharpen my images a bit, because you can see that on that particular part of the image, it looks quite good. So if I bring the sharpen it, it sort of brightens it up, and it brings it sort of highlights that particular part of the image. So I'll give it sort of halfway-ish. I'll take all these sliders across to sharpen that, and I'll also add some noise reduction. I tend to do this quite often because, especially with my Micro Four Thirds camera, because I think it needs it. So I generally do that sort of level of noise reduction. I don't use any other mix of software. I just use Lightroom. I could go for auto correct it, and that looks okay. That's fine. And one more thing I could do is just give it a bit of a vignette. So I might do a vignette now, and that's the image. So it might not look particularly fantastic because it isn't a particularly fantastic image. And I have had comments on my videos to say, well, your images aren't very good. And yeah, that's right. They're more often than not very good. And I'll challenge anyone to go out every single time with their camera and take fantastic photos, because I think that's not real. And I'm like anyone else, and I take not the best shots quite often, but I take enough shots to get one or two good ones. And more often than not, the photos in my videos are not always fantastic. That's because I'm spending much more time videoing than taking photos, and I'm spending more effort on the video than the photos themselves. But that's life. So one more thing I tend to do, or pretty much more often than not, is now crop the image. And I always crop my images to 5.4 or 4.5 in this instance. And more often than not, I crop my images in vertical formats to fit with Instagram, because I usually post my images on Instagram. I've got the camera on a third. I've got this little bit of light in the foreground, just to add a little bit of extra interest to the image. What I suppose I could do is just add a radial filter and try to bring out this part of the image so we can brighten it up a little bit, just to give that the kind of reflection. That I think that looks okay, and that kind of gives it a bit more of an image, a bit more of a reflection. It probably looks a bit odd down there, so I'll probably delete that and take that off, because I'm not sure if I even like it. But yeah, that's my finished image, so I'm going to save that down, and let's have we'll have a look at the next image. So I've exported that out now. So the other image I took was of this candle, and I'm pretty much going to do the same thing that I just did with this image. So I'll have a look at the exposure, bring the exposure down. Don't really need to have exposure down. Bring the highlights. So if I bring the highlights down too much, it loses the image completely. But if I what tends to happen when you bring the highlights down, it kind of grays out the whites. So you don't want to bring the highlights down too much, otherwise that won't look very white. Likewise with the whites, if you do the same thing, it turns the whites grey. So you don't really want to take too much out. But you can bring the shadows down, that's quite good, and you can bring the blacks up, so that darkens the image nicely. What I like about this image is this light, this reflected light from the candle on the front, because I think it draws your eye up towards the candle, and I think that goes well. As I said earlier, I'll add a bit of texture, because that kind of brings out this part of the image. I can dehaze this. Let's have a look, see what that does. I can dehaze this down. I think that works quite well, dehazing it. I very rarely touch clarity, so if you see, if I bring clarity up, then it's bringing up all the rest of this image, which is okay, but it's not really the view I want. I could put a little bit of clarity on, but I very rarely touch it. Vibrance, I can add a bit of vibrance to this image because I've got this colour, so that's quite nice. So I'll put a bit of vibrance on, but if I do saturation, as I said earlier, it just makes it all orange and horrible, and it's not very nice. I think if I leave that there, I think that looks all right. So what I can do is bring the lights up a little bit. That works, I think, for me, and bring the darks down a little bit. I don't need to do much of the darks. If I take too much dark, it kind of loses all this light at the bottom. So I might just leave the darks as they were. And shadows, I can bring the shadows down. That does the same thing, so I'll leave the shadows where they were as well. So I think that's fine. Then I can come to saturation. If I wanted to bring the saturation up in the yellows or the oranges, I can do. It's maybe a little bit of orange. That's fine. I think that looks nice. And then finally, I'll sharpen. So this is a really good sort of view of this candle burning. So you can see if I sharpen it, see how much detail is brought out once it's sharpened. That looks quite good. So I'm going to bring the sharpening up. I generally bring all these sliders. I don't know what they all do, but I'm just clicking them all. And then I'll do a bit of noise reduction as well. So I'll do all those. So I think that looks really good. And then I don't need to do any adjustments, and I probably could just put a little bit of a vignette in, but it doesn't make any difference. And then finally, as I did with the last image, I'll crop this to 4.5 and I'll do it up vertical. So this one I'm going to put straight in the middle. and I'm just going to do kind of that's there. So let's put that in the middle, out there. So that's the image. So it's got a bit of light here. That's a low-key image, a little bit of light running up towards the candle. In my mind, that's a low-key image. But I hope that's watching me edit is, see how quick and easy it is. I don't take any time whatsoever editing photos, and I'm not one of those people that spend half an hour trying to perfect every little thing and do all sorts of things. That's editing for me. So if you see my photos on Instagram, you know how much editing I've done. That's about it. Finally, I will just export that, and you'll see that at the video at the end. If you found this video useful, then you might want to watch my video on high key photography, which I do a very similar thing, but look at the completely opposite end of the photography light spectrum, if you like. And if you have enjoyed this video, why not give it a like? Thank you very much indeed for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheerio.